Good morning. We're excited to see so many people here. My name is Andreas Ekström. I'm every day a reporter at the newsroom at Sydsvenska Dagbladet in Malmö, Sweden, but sometimes they do let me out to conduct meetings of this kind, which I'm very excited to do today. And without further ado, to give you more of a formal welcome, I'd like to introduce to the stage the Secretary General for this fine organization, Mr. Olof Berggren.
Thank you very much. And welcome everybody to the ICLD, the International Center for Local Democracy. To us at ICLD, the global goals and the universal approach is a strong argument for what we are going to do today. Sharing and also networking and learning from each other. Sharing experience and learning together. When it comes to the SDGs and to the 2030 agenda, we know that a lot of the work must be done at a local level, where we are closest to the people. We also know, of course, that there are huge challenges in this, and that we need to be creative, we need to be brave, and we need to work together, and we need to learn together to take on this big challenge. And we, here at the ICLD, we want to be part of that. We know that we could be a small but successful part in reaching the goals. And this is what we hope to be with our programs and our tools and what we can and what we can do. To do this, we are organized in 3 legs. The Municipal Partnership Program, where we promote partnership between Swedish municipalities and regions and with other countries, 20 or 21 other countries. And also international training program, where we offer training to civil servants and politicians on local level. And of course the Knowledge Center, where we disseminate, we promote and we fund some research on local democracy and local development. So if you're interested in what we are doing and want to learn a little bit more, stay after the seminar. You're welcome to do that and talk to me and talk to the people that work here and know everything about local democracy. So stay after the seminar and we will talk more. But today's seminar, we will share experiences and discuss an important issue. 10 ways to create a more inclusive city for refugees. And let's not waste more time because 2030 is not that far away. So I leave to you, Andreas, to lead us through this seminar. And most welcome.
Thank you. Indeed, 2030 is not so far away, so we want to try to get going as soon as we can. We have a record number of refugees in the world today, and it's really hands-on simple. That's what we want to try to do. Try to attack this at least in the first half of this little seminar. How do we make that work at a local level? How do we remain inclusive and open and practical, hands-on, to make this work? We have a total of 6 panelists that you're going to meet, but we're going to take them 3 by 3. And we're going to start by taking this local hands-on approach as much as we can. First of all, Mr. Joseph Seyonga, who's a city council member at the Makindye division in Kampala, Uganda. Welcome to the stage, Joseph. I'd also like you to meet Mark Evesit, who's the Chief Officer, Ministry of Lands and Urban Planning in Turkana County in Kenya. Welcome. If you stay over here too, I can then see you all. And also, please, all the way from Botkyrka, Sweden, Ms. Susanne Hedlund, who's a coordinator of refugee inclusion. And so you can take the middle microphone there, Joseph. So you'll all be heard for the. We're not live casting this, but we're taping it just so you know what we have the cameras for. Now. First of all, I'd like to know, I mean, as a layman, I'm not an expert of this, but you get the feeling sometimes when you look at the news that the issues of the refugee crisis is the most pressing it ever has been. We're in the most difficult situation we ever have been. You know more about that. How grave is the situation globally at this point? Let's just start there. How acute is this?
Thank you, members. important to mention that I'm Make Wesiti Woy. I'm Chief Officer in charge of Lands and Urban Planning, Turkana County Government, Kenya. It's important to mention here, in Kenya, we have got two levels of governments. We have the national level, which deals with the laws, and we have the county governments, which deal with the issues of spatial planning and where major refugees activities are taking place. So this is the place where I want to highlight today that in Turkana County, we have about 200,000 refugees hosted in Kakuma camp. And it's estimated every week we are getting about 1,000 refugees influx from the neighboring countries of Sudan, even Ethiopia, Rwanda, Burundi, about approximately 14 nationalities. So this is the pressure that we are getting from the refugees that are getting into the county. So the challenge has been, how do we get a solution and how do we get into inclusion to enable them live a livable life like any other person? What we've done as a county, first in history of refugees of about 25 years, refugees have been around Turkana County government or around Turkana for about 25 years. So what we've done since the devolution of governance came into being with the leadership of the governor of Turkana, would allow me to mention his name, Josephat Kolinano. What he has been advocating is, can we organize the space? Can we do land use planning? Can we have integrated urban land use planning where we have a spatial plan which has been prepared to take care of the ballooning number of refugees? Now, just to give a little bit of a brief history, that before then, the refugees used to come and then get a transition to the transition center where it is resettled without any plan, any land use plan. So what happened is because of not planning for them, the basic infrastructure were completely were overloaded. You know, there was shortage of water, there was shortage of waste management system, there was you know, a lot of scrambling even for facilities like health facilities and like. So the governor for Turkana County said, look, we can't continue like this. So can we have a new approach where every other new coming refugee must have an organized space, must have a planned space where they come, and we already have an organized land use, like where they will be able to reside, the residential area, the commercial area, the access road, and planning around the basic facilities, you know, where they can also be able to enjoy. So what we have done in the Ministry of Land and Urban Areas is to spearhead the program of planning, spatial planning, in conjunction with other UN agencies like UNHCR, UN Habitat. So we have organized the space of about 1,500 hectares. This is courtesy of the host community and in conjunction with the county government and also other partners like national government of Kenya. So we have given we have provided about 1,500 hectares, the space where we organize and plan around the use of refugees. But most importantly, what we wanted, and the aspect is integrating them. You know, integrating the local host community with the refugees so that they have the space where they can be able to share. For example, we have got the water points, because being a pastoral community, there is need for water for livestock. So what the governor and the entire stakeholders want is to have an integrated approach, where it is not exclusively meant for meant for the space is not meant for the refugees, but also to the host community, shared together. We have the common space like the commercial area. So we provide a commercial hub where the refugees can also participate in economy, in their business, together with the locals. So this is the approach we are encouraging at the county level.
Well, let's leave it at that before we go into further detail, because I also want to hear from Joseph a little bit on just how you evaluate the situation right now. How urgent is the situation right now compared to historically as we've been dealing with refugee crisis?
I must say, like our brother from Kenya, what we experienced in Uganda is that impact on the social service delivery. That you find that we are overwhelmed with the numbers of refugees coming in. We have a few schools, because the swelling numbers of the refugees demand more space. That is as far as education is concerned. Health facilities are also overcrowded. And you find that the government at the helm has got that problem of catering for the locals and the surging numbers of refugees. So that again is impacted on the international community. And that's why you have this in your news, in the news, and you have also to feel the impact, and you have to come in and give a hand.
Mm-hmm. And Susanne, we're Sweden. We're so far away from this, and we have the stomach to talk about a refugee crisis. It's always been so crazy to me because it's such a tiny few part of the world's population that actually is able to flee to Europe. And now we've after the large numbers, relatively large numbers that came in 2015, we really changed our policy. There's not a whole lot of refugees coming to Sweden right now. Again, the same question to you. How do you, as an expert in this, measure the level of urgency at this point?
I think that it was more in 2015. It was more urgent, and in Sweden it was all about talking about a lot about housing, focus on long-term housing. I think we come a long way now in Sweden and in Botkyrka, and also I think it's important for me anyway that housing, long-term housing, is a way for creating inclusive cities. Because if you don't have somewhere to live, it's hard to think about. You need the basic safety before you can take the next step.
Mm-hmm. So let's go more into detail, and you can continue. What can a Swedish municipality like Botkyrka of 100,000 plus people do to make people feel immediately included as they arrive? Like not just waiting, not just being in storage, but really full-on citizens as soon as possible. What can we do?
I think education and work, of course, is a way to get more to feel included and feel welcome, as we talked about before. Of course, it's different. It's a bit so difficult because in Sweden it's not only the municipality, as you know, it's also the state that it's working on this issue. But I think we need to cooperate, the municipality and the state, to get the people to feel more included in the society. I think it's also about attitudes amongst. Or what would you say, like the people in the municipality. You need to have the attitude of welcoming new people and seeing also that it's not just a blank paper coming. This is actually people that had a life before they came to Sweden. We, instead of just thinking that we should help and we should learn them, fill them with Swedishness, we can learn from them. So it's a give and take.
Mm-hmm. And that's a big cultural change, of course. Now, Mark, there was a little trouble with your microphone, so go ahead and use this one instead. You can leave the other one on, but use that instead. Let me also ask you this: refugees tend to have very different backgrounds, have very different needs. As Susanne was saying, everybody's a different person with a different story. Yet there are some things that they do have in common. They may be traumatized. They may be in lack of basic just food and shelter. They may have left really fast from somebody. They may have lost somebody close. What are a few things that we can identify that refugees sometimes do have in common? Maybe that's a way to understand. situation better?
I think what is common about refugees is the bitter past. The bitter past that they don't want to find where they've been settled. And in Kenya, we have seen instances where a small provocation causes the flare-up. I mean, they start fighting amongst themselves. It could just be an accident with one of the community hosted there. Then you get the whole refugee camp is on fire. So this could be one of the common things, the bitter past. But what is happening and what we are doing as a county is to have the integration and the need to have peaceful sensitization programs where we bring them on board together with the host community. You know, we pick among them the representatives, and from the county government, specialist in Department of Peace, because we have the Department of Peace and Security, we just, we go about sensitizing and preaching peace. You know, that way we create harmony, and we just have to tell them, we love you, and you are part of us, and if there should be anything like even dispute between you, there is law. We can take it up with the government, the host community policies on laws, on security. What is also common about the refugees are the I can say in shortage of basic needs. Talk of even food. You know, they come without anything. So, but when they get into the point of resettlement, those are basic things that needs to be taken care of. Education. Those are basic things that the children must be, taken through. So they come there without really these basic things. So when they get to the point of resettlement, this is the point where now we need to bring them at par, also with the host community. But in Kenya and in Turkana in particular, we have been emphasizing on integration. The integration of the refugees with the host community. The situation in Kenya, the situation in Turkana is different. The UN agencies and other partner agencies, I think, are putting a bit of emphasis on the refugees. But you know, the host community also have their law, they have got their challenges. So what we've been advocating as a government is, can we integrate so that we don't have imbalance, we don't create imbalance, where we have the refugees again going, empowered and capacitated in terms of training and many other basic things at the expense of the community. So that then, that will again create animosity. You know, it will create some bit of bitterness between now the host community and the refugees. And we might end up again having another trouble, another dispute, maybe the community now again hitting the refugees. So these are the things that we felt must be put at par, at the same level, because it is common to the refugees.
And it's always interesting too to look at the really successful examples. Uganda has sometimes been said to be really the best place in the world to flee to. What is it that makes Uganda successful in dealing with such an important challenge as this is?
It's Opendoor policy, which is more driven by our president, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, who has endeavored to try to move all the nationals, that we give a home to the refugees, a home away from home. And that drive has made Uganda be known world over for this open door policy. Unlike our brothers from Kenya, you going to the settlement camps is optional. The refugees are given a chance to live in other places if they can manage, and that's left open for them. And actually, this is where I come in, because I come from Kampala City, a Machinda division. We have quite a good number of refugees living within the city and within the municipality where I come from. And unlike those who go in the settlement camps, these people are supposed to cater for themselves. If you can make it on your own, well and good. And the non-government organizations have come in to give an initial push to these refugees who have arrived. If you want to settle in the city or in another area, they can give you some money for house rent, some money for food, let's say for 3 months. That enables you to feel the atmosphere around you within the host communities, and to make you be able to make preparation to make yourself self-reliant. So you find that those who are in the city have to cater for themselves, feed themselves, meet the housing challenges, and it's up to them. If you the housing sector is on open market. If you can afford a very good settlement class, well and good. If you find that most of them cannot and have to end up in the slum areas where the housing sector is relatively cheap, but also it comes with its own challenges. So this is what has made Uganda tick world over, because people are free. They're given a choice. They have this to move with their right of choice where to stay. But as I say, you have a challenge of how do you meet these requirements, the housing requirements, the feeding of yourself, the education. In as much as this refugee open policy gives an opportunity to the refugees, but it also brings with it challenges to it. Because eventually what you may feel is free has its cost at the end of it involved. Because, as I said, this housing sector is not free. You have to pay house rent. Education, in as much as Uganda is giving universal primary education, for example, but there's also attached responsibilities, which means money, because you need to buy a uniform for the child, you need to buy scholastic materials, books, pens, and you need to feed the child. So you find that the government per se has got few public schools, and there are so many private schools. With the private schools, you have to pay for the fees. And for the public schools, you find that there are few, and there are many local people who are striving to get their children into those public schools. And now you have the refugees. So you have an experience where some of the children of the locals and also of the refugees don't go to school. Okay, and that already is a very big...
It's always hard for the lack of inclusion of the kids when the school doesn't work.
Yeah, it's quite a challenge.
But are we doing any better with that in Sweden, though? Because we sometimes hear that there's a lot of dropouts among the refugee first generation students, not a big run through rate up to college. Is there anything we can do on a citizen level to make schools more inclusive in that sense? Because that's obviously a main priority in Uganda.
In Sweden, of course, we have the right for all children to go to school. Even if you're a refugee, you have the same...
You have the legal right.
Yes,
yeah.
Legal right as anyone else, which is a good way for inclusive cities. But also, I think that we have... Say if you come late when you are a youth, more like 15, 16, 17, of course it's going to be hard to learn as much as a Swedish kid that was born here and went to school. What we did in Botkyrka was we started, instead of them going to traditional school, we made in the year 2015 and 16, we made an example where we... what would you say? Like in where the adults go to learn Swedish, we put the youth there and made it more adjustable to a person that has not been in Sweden from when you were born, to just adjust the schooling to their backgrounds.
Bit of a cultural adaptation on our part. Okay.
Yeah.
So before we switch to the second part of the panel, I'd like you, all three of you, I'd like an answer from each and every one of you to just make a wish, or let's call it a list. What is the one most important advice that you can give to citizens and leaders of the world in making this issue better? The one thing that goes before all other things in making this happen. Whoever cares to start. I realize it's difficult to rank it, but we're looking for 10 ways to create a more inclusive city for refugees. We may not find 10, but let's just start by framing one.
I'm sorry. Now you go ahead. Okay, thank you. I would say to be brave. The politicians in Sweden need to be more brave and to see the possibilities instead of focusing on, well, now it's so hard, we need to close our borders. We can't, because as you said, if we compare with other countries, we don't have so many refugees in Sweden.
Okay, so political bravery is the one thing. Okay. Joseph, what's your...
For me, I trust that the host governments have still work to do to sensitize the local leadership within the communities, because most of the work is at the top, and when you look at the top-down approach, there is a gap. So the host governments have got to come in to sensitize the local community leadership and also the community themselves, so that they bridge the gap. If the local community leadership can take over this, then they'll be able to handle the refugees as they flow in.
All right, so help local political engagement within refugee groups. That's your number one. Okay, let's also hear from Mark. What do you think is the one thing?
One major thing I think must be done to bring inclusiveness is to encourage politicians and other leaders in other sectors to make policies and laws that are inclusive, right? And for every support group and the agencies, let's also make integrated development programs without necessarily saying this is only for refugees and this is for host community. Should be an integrated development programs, jointly funded. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you to the three of you. Warm hand for the first half of our panel. We are going to now conduct a shift on the stage, which we're going to do Clark Kent style, just as fast, I think, almost. And we're about to meet three people who are going to talk about this more on a maybe national or even international level. At least we're going to try to differentiate a little bit like that. So the panelists here in the second segment is going to see if we can find any answers to the challenges that were just posed. Let's see if we can try to do it that way. Mohammed Al Saud, who's the co-founder of the Young Republic, which is an NGO. I'm going to let you introduce that. This is Mohammed. We're also excited to welcome the State Secretary to the Minister for International Development, Cooperation and Climate here in Sweden, Ms. Ulrika Modéer. Last but not least, Head of Democracy Assessment, Natalie Abed.
So you said I'm State Secretary. It means that I'm leading the work at the Ministry for Foreign Relations in Stockholm. But we are also, of course, then guiding the work that we do within our broad and development cooperation internationally through multilateral organizations, the UN, of course, but also the development banks. And I can get back to that because they have also changed their policy and work, and we have quite interesting examples. And then, of course, through our development agency, SIDA, and all the partners, and Folke Bernadotte, and a lot of, actually, of our state entities work within our development cooperation. And then, of course, broad civil society engagement, which Sweden is quite well known for. And ICLD is also one example of how we work with experiences through municipalities.
Right. And just as with culture, there's always a struggle. How much effort and how much political agency can this segment of policy has? Now, at what level? And it's going to be an election year next year. Do you guys feel that you have a high priority in the government work at this point, or are you settling back for other more harder or urgent matters? I mean, defense policy is big right now. There's always an issue of finance, of course. What's your status? Is what I'm looking to find out.
Well, Isabella Lövin is also the party leader for the Green Party.
And our Deputy Prime Minister.
And she's our Deputy Prime Minister. But the government as such has decided to focus on the implementation of Agenda 2030. And the Swedish Prime Minister has said that Sweden will be example that the world is looking for. And also, I mean, the world is also a bit pointing towards Sweden because even though, I mean, we of course have our challenges and our weaknesses with regard to policy and sometimes perhaps also political braveness, as was mentioned. But still, I mean, we are seen as a country that have taken a lot of responsibility. UNHCR is putting forward, we had the head of UNHCR in Sweden last week is putting forward also, I mean, Sweden being an example, at least among the European countries that have taken responsibility. But also because we have such an engagement in development cooperation. I mean, we're one of the countries that's contributing the most with quality and development cooperation support.
Okay, so it sounds like you're doing pretty good as far as that goes. Now, Mohammed Al Saud, can you tell us a little bit about the Young Republic, the organization that you represent, and what you do there?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Mohammed Al Saud, and there's a very weird voice in my ear, so I'm gonna use.
Yeah, you can use the hand mic. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mohammed Al Saud. I'm originally from Syria, but I live in Stockholm. I'm the co-founder and chairman of the Young Republic. It's an organization that works with democratic participation and social inclusion of young refugees in Sweden and Europe. And we have three pillars. The first one is non-formal education. Which is mainly focusing on participation and inclusion, democracy and human rights with young refugees and the host community. We design scenario games for youth groups where young people from different backgrounds can come in one place, meet each other behind the labels, have fun, and at the same time learn about democracy and the human rights through the games that we design. We also work with advocacy, mainly on a European level with the Commission and the Parliament, and we are working also with research.
All right, thank you very much. And we'd like to hear also just a general introduction from Natalie, if you care.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to try and fight with my microphone at the same time. My name is Natalie Abed. I'm the head of the Democracy Assessment Unit at the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance here in Stockholm. And among other things, we work on diversity issues, and that includes the analysis of how migration impacts on democracy.
All right, and I think for the next. Okay, so I'm going to ask some hands-on questions to you two before we look at policy level. What is, in your opinion, the most difficult informal barrier to include refugees in society? We're not talking law, we're not talking school, but informal. Go ahead.
Should I?
Yeah, for sure. Don't be shy.
I think it was discussed in the previous panel as well, and I think it has to do with the change that comes and that there is resistance perhaps among the hosting communities with regard to the stress that is put on social service and social delivery. And I think, I mean, that we have in common. I mean, the discussion, most of you here in this room followed the discussion when we had a lot of refugees coming to seek asylum in Sweden in 2015. And that was what the municipalities and regions had to deal with. Even though, of course, we have more resources, but we also have high expectations on standard with regard to social service among our citizens. And, we heard this from the panel before, so, we have that in common. And then we really have to work with a more long-term perspective on, of course, there is an initial cost for a community and for a country to receive refugees, but there are also so many experiences of how this has brought a lot of resources and human capital to countries. And that has been the case in Sweden and many European countries, and that has also been the case, I think, in many countries also in the Middle East. Jordan, for example, I mean, they can tell about stories where they have received refugees before, and they have, I mean, really been part of also economic development in Jordan. So we have that in common internationally, and we need to learn from those experiences and have a more long-term perspective.
Informal borders, informal obstacles.
Passing it around. Yeah, I think if from a refugee perspective, I think one of the most difficult things is the language barrier, plus simply knowledge about the country you're coming to, and the information. And I would say not just getting that knowledge, but getting it very quickly, or let's say in a time period that makes some sense, so that you are able to orientate yourself in terms of all the basic needs that everybody needs, right? And it's not just a refugee. When I say information, you know, of course, about the country to the refugees, but the other way around as well, that the host communities, of course, should have much more information about where the refugees are coming from and what their situation is. And I think that's a starting point for many of the government institutions.
So, Mohammed, I don't know if you agree with this, but sometimes I get the feeling that the Swedish approach to this is very caretaking. So the general approach as the Swedes, that we need to take care of this people, and then we sometimes take away their agency from them. A more an American way would be to say, we're going to provide some basic tools for you to make it yourselves, which also sounds a lot like what we heard from the Ugandan example. You can do this, but if you do that, you're on your own, and that's cool. We like that. While the Swedish approach is, no, we have these rules, and we want to help you, and we want to get some therapy and some daycare and some Swedishness and some all of this before you even dare to step out in this terrible, terrible society that Sweden may be very difficult. So it's a very problem-oriented approach sometimes. Is that me being prejudiced there, or is that also your experience as a Syrian moving to Sweden?
I think that, yeah, you are totally right.
I thought so, too bad, huh?
Well, the thing is, I think one of the things that we are really advocating to change is the way refugees perceived. As you said, they are people without agency, and they are like faceless, voiceless, homogeneous group, which is not true, as just common sense. I think that the first thing that we talk about when we talk about informal barriers, that how, as I said, refugees are perceived as aid recipient, as people who are not self-organized, and that, as you said, we need to take care of them. So whenever we have refugee self-organized groups, these people are totally put aside, and this one-direction approach is continuing to occur. So I think that one of the main things that we need to change is this emergency approach to actually looking at refugees today. Because when we say refugees, even in the discussions, it's the Calais type that comes to our minds. It's people who need food and blanket. It is valid in different cases, but in so many cases, especially if we are talking now in Sweden or in some other Western European countries, it's not food and blankets. It's social inclusion, it's democratic participation, it's having the same equal access to goods and services and to the rights. Because we sometimes tend to forget that the refugee of today most probably is the citizen from a foreign background tomorrow. And this is actually happened. The people who came in 2012, today they are Swedish citizens. So what kind of legacy we are having for our future citizens?
Right. Ulrika, go ahead and take the other microphone. You don't have to pass them all around. There you go.
Okay, so I think one of the problems with international development cooperation is the separation that has been there and is there also for good reasons between humanitarian assistance and more long-term development support. And for the first time, the world community had a summit on the relation of humanitarian support and more long-term support. Because in a world with an increasing number of conflicts that we see now, but also with a number of protracted crises, that is long-term crisis, as we see in Kenya with the camp that has been there for 25 years. I mean, we need to find ways how to support both local communities, but also countries in their policy and legislation, as was said, to see how to work more on integration and bridge the support that we have, humanitarian support that is much more of a blankets, of course, and the support that is giving possibilities to integrate refugees into the local communities. So is now also starting, and that's what's being done. And Sweden took a decision on a new kind of strategy for the first time, where we're integrating humanitarian support and more long-term support around the Syria crisis. But also many of the big international organizations, as I mentioned, the World Bank, for instance, is working with UNHCRs to see how to give support also to the neighboring countries, both policy-wise, but also much more in practice, to see how to, and also to decrease the risk of conflict between refugees and the host communities.
So I'm going to try to post a statement and just hear your reactions on it. I'm not sure if I'm onto something here, but let's try and have Natalie answer first. If you are a government who is pro taking refugees, you like the idea of taking refugees, then you sometimes argue that it's good for us, it's good for the economy, it's good for our learning experience, it's a very practical, we're meeting a need of our own. We need to staff the elderly care. We have all these it's a resource, basically. Now, in your personal private commitment, as my personal private commitment, I think a wealthy country has a moral obligation to help. Sounds old-fashioned almost, but it just strikes me that the government approach is practical, financial, hands-on, almost selfish, while the personal approach is really about private morals. Those two things are very different. It takes different ways of speaking about it. This is something I think we should be doing. I don't care if it's expensive. I think we should be doing this because some people are dying. That's not what you generally hear the Prime Minister say. That's not the approach. He will say, we're going to need to staff our elderly care. So is there a problem with the way that we are dividing formal policy with human instinct here? It's a tough one, I know, but I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the fact that once you get into government, life becomes more difficult, I guess, because I fully agree with you that as an individual, you have, let's say, a more it's a private decision on how welcoming, how tolerant, and how engaged you as a citizen want to become to help refugees, right? And I think that is a moral obligation that every citizen, in my view, should have, because if it doesn't start with the individual, it's never going to get to the government, because in the end, the government is also individuals, right? So in my ideal world, if a government policy speaks to all these complexities that the migration, because migration is such a complex topic, it poses really big dilemmas for policymakers or the government, because it goes to our feeling of identity and it goes to our feeling of our values. And because it does that, I think government policies tend to want to focus on the practical. That's the money and the number of houses and all of that is correct. But I think that there should be much more connection between what the government is doing in terms of creating what we call a tolerance culture, which speaks to what the citizens themselves also feel about how refugees should be welcomed. And you see this disconnect, and there is a disconnect between all over Europe. You saw it with the refugee crisis when the borders closed and you had people going to the train stations as a citizen welcoming people, whereas the governments were closing the borders. And you just see a big disconnect because, of course, they have let's say the bigger picture, but of course over time these two, I think if this is where we make the connection that government policies must speak more to creating a tolerant, welcoming culture, then you can also, in my view, it's not really realistic to it's not really a good argument to say in Europe that we cannot really take in the number of refugees that are coming to Europe. This whole controversy around the EU that we hear these days about the number of refugees and how many should be, distributed in the European Union, and Italy now crying for help. If you compare that to the numbers in other countries in Africa and Jordan and Lebanon, we really do not have a lot of numbers. So it's not, I think it's a bit of a political excuse to be a bit controversial here, to say we don't have the houses, we don't have the municipalities, we don't have the space to take in Europe at least, the refugees that we're seeing. And there you see that disconnect, because a citizen who lives in a small municipality and who's confronted with refugees and gets to know them and has to start taking their own welcoming or doing their own actions. And there are many of those that work. And so I think that needs to be worked on. And I think it's a bit of sometimes a good or easier political excuse to say we can't take the numbers in Europe.
Sorry. For us, also one of the things that we really push for and fight for is taking refugees is not a help you do as a government. It's your own legal obligation as a signatory of the Geneva Convention 1951. And today, this legal discourse, it's totally drifting away. And then welcoming refugees, it's just becoming like propaganda for how good the government is, which is not, because you must, as a signatory, you must take in refugees. It's your own legal responsibility as a signatory of this convention. Of course, today, what is the European countries playing around that in the Geneva Convention, it is mentioned that anyone who gets the refugee status, then they should get equal rights to the citizens of that country. So today we are playing around that by giving secondary humanitarian protection. So they are not refugees anymore, so we can do whatever we want with them. This is the first thing. And the second thing is, this is not comfortable for many people to talk about, but we need to think of democracy not only on a micro level, on a national level, but on a macro level. What is the price that other people are paying to have this micro democracy? And here, I'm particularly talking about arms trade. In the last report that Diakonia launched, because now they are launching a big campaign against Swedish arms trade, they found out that Sweden is selling weapons to 26 authoritarian regimes. Just think that these weapons, conventional and unconventional weapons, how many refugees are created by these weapons every day, every month, every year, and what is the percentage of these people coming to Sweden? And I have a very concrete example. In 2011, Ericsson sold to the Assad regime a very advanced surveillance software that managed to kick out and kill and detain thousands and thousands of activists. But today, no one talks about, okay, what we are contributing to the refugee crisis or whatever you want to call it. I think if we just think about these two, the legal obligation and what is the things that we are doing to contribute to the refugee crisis, a lot of perspective will change there. But I totally agree on an individual level, it's this moral openness approach that we need to
What you're doing there is
on.
that you're including them together. What you're doing there is you're saying that there is a moral aspect to governance, which we sometimes may lose. Are you working for a moral government?
Yes, I'm working for more policy within the government, and I think it's very important what you said. I mean, we can't only talk about morals or practical things, but we need to talk about the convention as well. And I think, I mean, of course, Europe, and this is also the position of the Swedish government, could deal with the situation to take responsibility for refugees. And this is also what the Swedish government is negotiating within the EU, but there is no way forward within the negotiations, as you can see. So, I mean, this is a tragedy because, of course, the EU could take responsibility. Now we're talking about refugees and, well, the moral, but not least, I mean, there is an obligation with the convention that we have. But, of course, there is also a situation that many of the people who are coming towards Europe are also migrants. And UNHCR's, I mean, they say now it's about 30% that they assess as refugees among the people who arrive. So there's also a need to see also how we can support, and that has also been part of the international discussions with UNHCR and IOM. IOM also now being included in the UN family. How we can also work with human rights with regard to the increasing number of people who migrate. As well. I mean, they are also a group that we need to see to. And then, of course, the internally displaced persons that we are not mentioning here, but that's also one of the great number of people who need support, and then where we talk about local hosted communities.
So hopefully that concludes us with the point that big government and personal morals is something that we should look at together and not as two separate entities. At least that's the way I like to interpret this answer. We're going to close this just a little before the hour because I'm sure that many of you would like to just catch any of the panelists on the way out. But we also have Ana Maria Vargas here from the ICLD to just give a little thank you to the panelists and mention something about a workshop coming up. So if there's a microphone for Ana, and also a few little bags for her to hand out. So I'll leave the stage to you.
Yes, thank you so much for having a spicy and controversial panel. I really enjoyed it, and I'm super happy. Municipal partnerships with Kenya or Uganda, and if you come from a Swedish municipality, you're a politician or a civil servant, we have a workshop that starts at 12:30, a lunch workshop, and please register with one of us from ICLD, and we can see if we can find practical ways to do these partnerships and look for ways forward for refugee inclusion. And a big applause to our panel. Thank you.